The Galactic Council had always treated humanity like children who wandered into a room full of adults. When the Velkorn scout ships found Earth 30 years ago, they laughed at what they saw. Humans had no armor plating on their skin, no telepathic powers, and their weapons seemed almost primitive compared to the plasma rifles and energy shields that other species carried as standard equipment. The Council gave Earth a small seat at the table, not because they respected humans, but because it amused them to watch these soft creatures try to compete in a galaxy full of predators. Lisa Cameron had served as Earth's ambassador for 5 years now. Every day she walked into the Council chamber on Nexus Prime Station, and every day she felt the weight of condescension from the other species. The Velkorn looked down at her from their floating platforms. The Thrasic chittered in their language, making jokes they thought she could not understand. The other species simply ignored her, as if humanity was too insignificant to warrant their attention. She had tried everything to gain real influence, to make Earth matter in galactic politics, but nothing worked. Commander Jake Morrison ran Earth's security detail on the station with 12 officers under his command. They carried rifles that the Velkorn considered antiques and wore armor that the Thrasic could probably crack with their bare claws. Jake had served in the Marines before joining the diplomatic corps, and he knew how to read a room. The other species did not fear humans, and that was a problem. In his experience, respect without fear was just polite contempt. Everything changed on a Tuesday afternoon when the alarm started screaming across every sensor array in Council space. The Zerathi Dominion had been making aggressive moves for months, taking over small colonies and enslaving populations on the frontier worlds. The Council had issued warnings and placed economic sanctions, but nobody actually did anything to stop them. The Zerathi were dangerous and well-armed, so the Council preferred to write stern letters rather than risk actual conflict. 200 Zerathi warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. Each ship was the size of a small moon, covered in weapon batteries and shield generators that could deflect anything the Council had in their arsenal. The message from the Zerathi warlord Craven was simple and brutal. Humanity would surrender completely and accept slavery, or every human city would burn. There was no negotiation, no diplomacy, just a demand for total submission. Lisa stood at the podium in the Council chamber with her hands shaking as she tried to keep her voice steady. Around her, representatives from 40 different species sat in their comfortable seats looking anywhere but at her. She could see the calculation in their eyes. Helping Earth meant war with the Zerathi, and nobody wanted that fight. The Council leader was a Velkorn named Theron who stood 3 meters tall with purple skin and eyes like black mirrors. He spoke in a voice that tried to sound sympathetic but came across as patronizing. The Council could not commit military forces to defend every member world, he explained. Earth would need to negotiate with the Zerathi or make other arrangements. The words were polite, but the meaning was clear. Humanity was on its own. Lisa felt rage building in her chest as she looked around the chamber. Other arrangements meant surrender or death, and everyone in this room knew it. A Thrasic representative actually laughed, a chittering sound that made her skin crawl. Perhaps humans should have built better defenses before joining the galactic community, it said. The room murmured in agreement. Jake watched from the observation deck with his jaw clenched so tight his teeth hurt. He had suspected this would happen, but seeing it play out still made him furious. The Council was bloated with bureaucracy and paralyzed by politics. They would watch Earth burn rather than risk their own comfort. He activated his secure comlink and spoke quietly into his wrist unit. Morrison to Luna Base, he said. Initiate protocol Nightfall. Authorization code Morrison 7 Alpha Black. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains in a bunker that did not officially exist, Admiral Stephen Blake received the transmission. He had been waiting for this moment, dreading it but preparing for it nonetheless. Around him stood dozens of officers in crisp uniforms, their faces showing grim determination. Blake took a deep breath and looked at each of them in turn before speaking. Ladies and gentlemen, he said quietly, it is time to show them what humanity really is. The Zerathi Fleet Commander Warlord Craven sat on his command throne watching Earth grow larger on his view screen. His scanners showed pathetic defenses, a few orbital platforms that looked like they were held together with wire and hope, some atmospheric fighters that would burn up the moment they encountered real weapons, a scattered collection of human ships that appeared to be cargo haulers with guns strapped to them. This would be easier than he thought. Begin the bombardment, Craven ordered. Target their major population centers. I want them begging for mercy within the hour. The first wave of plasma torpedoes launched toward Earth, and everyone watching from the council chamber assumed they were witnessing the end of humanity. Lisa collapsed into her seat with tears streaming down her face. This was how it ended. Earth would become a cautionary tale that parents told their children about what happens when you are weak in a dangerous galaxy. But then something impossible happened. The torpedoes simply stopped moving. Halfway to Earth's atmosphere, they froze in space as if they had hit an invisible wall. Every weapon the Zirathi fleet fired met the same fate, suspended in a shimmering barrier that had materialized around the entire planet. The barrier glowed with energy signatures that made no sense on any scanner the Zirathi possessed. Craven stared at his view screen in disbelief. "What is that?" he demanded. "Where did that shield come from?" His tactical officer's voice wavered as he read the incoming data. "Sir, massive energy signatures are emerging from Earth's moon and several locations in the asteroid belt. They are activating something. From hidden bases on Luna, Mars, the moons of Jupiter, and a dozen hollowed-out asteroids, humanity revealed what it had been building in secret for 30 years. Not exploration vessels or merchant ships, but weapons. Massive weapons platforms and warships designed specifically to kill anything the galaxy could throw at Earth. Humanity had spent 3 decades studying every species in the Council, learning their weaknesses, reverse engineering their technology, and building counters to every defensive system known to exist. Captain Ryan Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Valiant. His ship was one of 50 dreadnoughts that had been hidden in the outer solar system, concealed by stealth technology that made them invisible to every known form of sensor. The Valiant was twice the size of the largest Zirathi battleship, and covered in weapons that Earth's best scientists had spent decades perfecting. "All ships, this is Mitchell," he said calmly. "Time to introduce ourselves. Fire at will." The Valiant's main railgun fired a tungsten projectile at a significant fraction of light speed. It punched through a Zirathi battleship's shields like they were made of paper, and tore the vessel in half. Atmosphere and debris sprayed into the void as the two halves of the ship spun away from each other. Across the human fleet, 49 other dreadnoughts opened fire with similar results. The Zirathi had never seen kinetic weapons with this much power, and their shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. In the council chamber, every representative sat in stunned silence watching the holographic display. The humans were destroying the Zirathi fleet with casual efficiency. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for years were being reduced to scrap, metal by species that everyone had dismissed as harmless. Jake Morrison allowed himself a small smile as he watched. Theron's face turned an interesting shade of purple. On Earth, Dr. Linda Hayes monitored the deployment of humanity's second surprise from a facility that officially did not exist. Project Phantom had been the most classified program in human history. While other species relied on heavy armor and powerful shields, humans had perfected something else entirely: stealth technology that rendered ships completely invisible to every known form of detection. Phantom Squadron is in position. She reported to Admiral Blake. Zirathi command ship is locked. Commander Alex Turner sat in the cockpit of his stealth fighter 50 kilometers from the Zirathi flagship. His ship was one of 300 such craft that had maneuvered undetected into the heart of the enemy formation. Every weapon system showed green. He waited for the order. "All Phantom units," the command came through his headset. "Light them up." 300 stealth fighters dropped their concealment fields simultaneously and unleashed nuclear-tipped missiles at point-blank range. The Zirathi never saw them coming. 30 capital ships, including Warlord Craven's flagship, vanished in nuclear fireballs that lit up the solar system like miniature stars. The remaining Zirathi vessels broke formation and tried to retreat, but they did not make it far. From Earth's orbital platforms, weapon systems that had appeared dormant suddenly came online. Massive magnetic accelerators began firing smart mines into the paths of the fleeing ships. Each mine was a simple tungsten sphere, covered in maneuvering thrusters and loaded with antimatter charges. They pursued the Zirathi ships like hunting dogs chasing rabbits. The Zirathi fleet that had numbered 200 ships an hour ago was reduced to burning debris floating in Earth's orbit. Lisa Cameron stood slowly in the council chamber, her tears forgotten. Every eye was now on her, and she felt a savage satisfaction at the fear she saw in their faces. She spoke clearly, her voice carrying across the vast space. For 30 years you have underestimated us, she said. You thought we were weak because we are soft. You thought we were primitive because our technology seemed crude. You were wrong about everything. Lisa gestured to the holographic display where Earth's defense fleet was forming up in perfect military formation. The ships moved with precision that spoke of countless hours of training and coordination. She looked directly at Theron and saw something in his eyes that she had never seen before when he looked at humanity. Fear. Humanity has been fighting wars since we learned to pick up rocks, Lisa continued. We have perfected the art of violence over 10,000 years of constant conflict. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy of warfare is written into our genetic memory. We did not join the galactic community to make friends. We joined to learn everything we could about potential enemies. The chamber erupted in outrage. Representatives were standing and shouting in dozens of different languages. Some demanded explanations, while others called for immediate sanctions against Earth. Lisa simply stood there, calm and composed, as Jake Morrison walked down from the observation deck to join her on the floor. The question you should all be asking, Jake said loudly enough to cut through the noise, is why we have not used these weapons before now. Why did we hide our strength for 30 years? The chamber fell silent as the representatives realized they did not have an answer to that question. Because despite everything, Lisa said softly, we hoped we would not need them. We hoped the council would actually protect its members. We hoped that civilization meant something more than political games and empty promises. But today you proved us wrong. When Earth faced extinction, you did nothing but watch. Admiral Blake appeared on the main display, his image transmitted from Earth's command center. He wore his full dress uniform with rows of medals that represented conflicts and campaigns the galaxy knew nothing about. Behind him stood rows of officers at attention, members of the Galactic Council, Blake said in a voice that carried absolute authority. Humanity hereby withdraws from provisional status in your organization. From this moment forward, Earth is a sovereign power. We will defend ourselves and our interests as we see fit. Any species that attempts what the Zerathi did today will face complete destruction. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in chaos. Lisa and Jake walked out without another word, leaving behind representatives who would never look at humanity the same way again. The doors closed behind them, and Lisa finally let herself take a shaking breath. That went better than expected, Jake said quietly. Lisa laughed, but there was no humor in it. We just declared ourselves independent and threatened the entire galaxy. I'm not sure better is the right word. Back on Earth, Admiral Blake stood at the window of his command center looking out at the planet below. The cities were still standing, the ocean still blue, and billions of people were going about their lives unaware of how close they had come to annihilation. Colonel Karen Foster approached with a datapad in her hands. Admiral, she said, we are detecting unusual fleet movements across Council space. The Velcorn and Crithian empires are pulling their forces back from border regions and consolidating around their homeworlds. Blake nodded. They are scared, and scared people make unpredictable decisions. Double our patrol schedules and keep all defense platforms on high alert. In the weeks following what the galaxy now called the Battle of Sol, the political landscape shifted like sand in a windstorm. Species that had dismissed humanity as harmless now watched Earth with nervous eyes. Trade routes were quietly rerouted away from human-controlled space. Diplomatic communications became careful and formal, where they had once been casual and dismissive, but not everyone was pulling away. In a neutral space station in the Andavar sector, Lisa met with an ambassador from a coalition of smaller species. His name was Sareth, and he belonged to a reptilian species that had been paying tribute to the Velcorn for 3 generations. He bowed deeply when Lisa entered the meeting room. Ambassador Cameron, Sareth said, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I represent 17 species that have long suffered under the Council's indifference. When we saw what your people did to the Zerathi, we felt something we have not experienced in generations. Hope. Lisa studied him carefully. What exactly are you hoping for? Protection, Sareth replied. Alliance. The Council has failed us just as they failed you. The Velcorn take our resources without fair payment. The Thrasik enslave our colonies when they feel like it. The Council does nothing because we are small and weak and unimportant. But Earth has shown that strength is possible. We wish to learn from you, trade with you, and if necessary, shelter under your protection. The proposal sparked intense debate back on Earth. President Helen Martinez convened her cabinet in the Situation Room where military, officers and diplomats argued late into the night. General Patrick Cole pounded the table hard enough to make everyone's coffee cups jump. "We cannot become the galaxy's police force," he said. "We barely have enough ships to defend our own system properly." Secretary of Defense William Grant shook his head. "But we have the technology they need, and every species we help becomes an ally. The Council has shown they are unreliable at best and hostile at worst. We need friends out there." Lisa attended the meeting via video link from the space station. "The Free Systems Alliance represents a combined population of 12 billion beings," she said. "Their industrial capacity is significant, even if their military strength is lacking. If we provide protection and military technology, they provide manufacturing capability, raw resources, and intelligence about Council activities. It is a fair exchange that benefits everyone." President Martinez listened to all the arguments before making her decision. "We will agree to a mutual defense pact, but with strict conditions. Any species that joins our alliance must agree to human standards of military conduct, transparent democratic government, and the absolute prohibition of slavery or genocide. We are not building an empire, but we will defend those who cannot defend themselves." The announcement sent shockwaves through galactic politics. Within 3 days, 7 more species applied to join what was now being called the Terran Alliance. Within a month, that number had grown to 24. Species that had paid tribute to Council powers for centuries were suddenly looking to Earth for leadership and protection. The Galactic Council watched with growing alarm as their authority crumbled like old paper. Trade routes that had enriched Council members for generations were being redirected to human-controlled space stations. Species that had been reliable sources of resources and labor were now protected by Earth's military umbrella. Theron called an emergency session in the Council chamber. "We cannot allow this human expansion to continue," he said. "They are destabilizing centuries of established order and diplomatic relationships." A Crithian admiral with gleaming blue scales spoke up from his floating platform. "What do you propose exactly?" "Military action against Earth. Have you reviewed the tactical reports from the Battle of Sol? Their weapons technology is at least 50 years ahead of ours, and they clearly have more ships than they showed us." "Propose we contain them economically," Theron replied. "Diplomatic isolation, trade embargoes, and if necessary a complete blockade of human space. The humans are strong, but they are still just one species. We represent hundreds of civilizations." What the Council did not know was that Jake Morrison had anticipated exactly this response. Human intelligence services had been quietly infiltrating Council communication networks for months, using technology the Council did not know existed. Every Council meeting was monitored and every diplomatic message was intercepted and analyzed. When the Council's official envoy arrived at Earth with a formal ultimatum demanding that humanity cease all alliance expansion or face economic warfare, President Martinez was completely prepared. She agreed to meet the envoy in front of live cameras that broadcast the meeting to every member of the Terran Alliance. The envoy was a pompous Velcorn official named Gorath who clearly expected the humans to be intimidated by his presence. He began reading from a prepared statement about violations of established galactic norms and the necessity of maintaining proper order. "Gorath," President Martinez interrupted pleasantly. "Before you finish reading that speech, I would like to show you something interesting." The screens behind her lit up with detailed technical information: ship designs, weapon specifications, strategic resource locations, classified military communications, and diplomatic cables, all of it belonging to the major powers of the Galactic Council. Gorath's purple face went pale as he recognized documents that should have been completely secure. "How did you obtain classified materials from every Council member?" Gorath stammered. "The same way we built an entire fleet without you noticing," Martinez replied. "We are very good at finding out what we need to know. Now here is our counter-proposal. The Council will cease all hostile actions against Earth and our allies immediately. You will open your markets to free trade with the Terran Alliance. You will grant full voting status to any species that request it without the decades-long application process you use to control membership. And if the Council refuses," Gorath asked. "Then we release all of this information publicly," Martinez said. "Every species in the galaxy will know exactly how vulnerable Council defenses really are. They will learn about every secret deal you have made, every time you have betrayed your own members for profit, every weakness in your military and political structure, and then we will see how long your authority lasts when everyone knows the truth. It was the most elegant act of extortion in human history. The council had no choice but to accept. The alternative was the complete collapse of their entire power structure, and they knew it. The council caved within 48 hours of President Martinez's ultimatum. They had no real choice in the matter. The alternative was watching their entire political structure collapse when every species in the galaxy learned how weak and corrupt they truly were. Official announcements were made about new trade agreements and reformed membership policies, but everyone knew what had really happened. Earth had blackmailed the most powerful organization in the galaxy and won. As news of humanity's victory spread, celebrations erupted across Terran Alliance space. On Nexus Prime Station, where Lisa had once begged uselessly for help, humans now walked through the corridors with their heads held high. Species that had mocked them just months ago now approached with requests for trade agreements and technology exchanges. The shift in attitude was almost comical in its suddenness. But Admiral Blake was not celebrating. He stood in a secure facility on Luna meeting with his senior staff, and the mood in the room was tense. Colonel Karen Foster pulled up a star map, showing the galaxy's current political divisions in different colors. Blue represented Terran Alliance space, which had grown significantly. Red showed the old Council territories, which were shrinking daily. Gray marked the neutral zones where species had not yet chosen sides. The Council has bent under pressure, but they have not broken, Karen warned. They are already reorganizing and reaching out to the more aggressive species. The Thresic Empire, the Velcorn hegemony, even scattered remnants of the Zerathi military. They are building a coalition of their own. Blake studied the map with a frown. How long before they are ready to move against us? Hard to say, Karen replied. 6 months at minimum, possibly a year. They are being careful and keeping their communications encrypted with new protocols we have not cracked yet. Captain Ryan Mitchell stood at the window overlooking Earth far below. We have changed the galaxy's balance of power, he said quietly. There is no going back to how things were before. No, there is not, Blake agreed. The question is whether we have made the galaxy safer, or just started a countdown to something much worse. The Terran Alliance continued to grow despite the looming threat. Within 6 months of the Battle of Sol, the Alliance included 43 different species controlling nearly a quarter of known space. Human military advisors trained alien soldiers in modern warfare tactics. Human engineers built defense stations around vulnerable worlds that had never known real protection before. Human diplomats negotiated trade deals that brought unprecedented prosperity to species that had been exploited for generations. But prosperity always breeds resentment among those who lose their advantages. In the shadowy corridors of power on the Velcorn homeworld, plans were being made. Admiral Theron had been stripped of his council leadership, but he still commanded significant military forces. He met in secret with representatives from species that had rejected the Terran Alliance. The humans are dangerous because they offer hope, Theron said to the gathered military leaders. They show weak species that they do not have to accept their place in the natural order. If we allow this to continue, the entire structure of galactic civilization will collapse into chaos. A Thrasic general clicked his mandibles in agreement. What do you propose? We have seen their weapons. Direct military confrontation would be costly even if we could win. We do not attack them directly, Theron explained. We undermine them. We destabilize their alliance from within. We show their new allies that human protection comes with strings attached, and that Earth is just another empire wearing a friendly mask. The plan was put into motion within weeks. Council intelligence services began covert operations across Terran Alliance space. They funded rebel groups on worlds friendly to Earth. They spread propaganda about human exploitation and hidden agendas. They sabotaged trade shipments and blamed it on human negligence. 12 different species within the Alliance suddenly experienced internal revolutions and civil unrest. In the Alliance Parliament on Unity Station, chaos reigned during emergency sessions. Ambassador Sareth confronted Lisa with barely controlled panic in his voice. 3 of our member worlds are in civil war, he said. Council agents are everywhere spreading lies and funding insurgents. We need Earth's military intervention immediately. But Lisa recognized a trap when she saw one. If we deploy forces to suppress these revolutions, the Council will claim we are an oppressive empire. Every species sitting on the fence will turn against us, and we will prove their propaganda true. Colonel Karen Foster had been tracking the pattern of unrest from her intelligence center. She brought her analysis to President Martinez with detailed charts and intercepted communications. "It is a coordinated campaign," she explained. "They are trying to force us into a position where we either abandon our allies and look weak, or we crack down hard and look like tyrants. Either outcome serves their purposes." President Martinez studied the reports carefully. "Then we do not play by their rules," she said. "We offer mediation instead of military intervention. We provide humanitarian aid instead of soldiers, and we expose exactly what the Council is doing to manipulate these situations." The counter-campaign was launched immediately. Human intelligence operatives worked with local resistance movements to capture Council agents. They documented evidence of bribery, assassination, and deliberate atrocities designed to provoke human intervention. All of this evidence was compiled and released to galactic media outlets. The public relations battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had witnessed before. The Council portrayed Earth as a dangerous rising power that threatened the established order and stability. Earth portrayed the Council as a corrupt oligarchy that would rather burn entire worlds than lose control of their privileges. Species across the galaxy were forced to choose sides based on which narrative they believed. Captain Alex Turner received new orders for his stealth carrier Shadow Dancer. His task force was being deployed to the disputed Corvin system, where a civil war threatened to spill across multiple borders. But his mission was not to fight. His orders were clear. Document everything, but do not fire first. We need them to be the aggressors. Alex found himself stationed in orbit around Corvin, watching cities burn through his view screen. Refugees fled in overcrowded ships that barely functioned. Both sides of the Civil War were committing atrocities against civilian populations. His crew begged for permission to intervene and stop the bloodshed. "Sir, we have the power to end this," his executive officer pleaded. "Why are we just sitting here watching people die?" "Because the moment we intervene, we prove the Council's propaganda true," Alex replied bitterly. "We become the foreign invaders. This has to be the Corvan's choice to ask for help, or the galaxy will see us as conquerors." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A mid-level Council bureaucrat named Virana belonged to a species called the Inari. She had served the Council faithfully for 30 years, but she finally reached her breaking point. She contacted Earth's embassy with encrypted files that contained devastating evidence. The files Virana provided were beyond damning. They contained not just proof of Council interference in Alliance worlds, but evidence of something much worse. Communications showing that the Council had actively encouraged the original Xyrathi attack on Earth. Messages between Council members discussing how the Xyrathi aggression would eliminate the human problem before it became serious. They had wanted Earth destroyed. When Lisa Cameron presented this evidence to galactic media networks, the reaction was explosive. Species that had supported the Council felt betrayed and angry. How many other attacks had the Council orchestrated or allowed to happen? How many times had they sacrificed smaller species for political convenience and profit? Within the Council chamber itself, representatives began resigning their positions. The Inari as a species officially withdrew from the Council and requested immediate membership in the Terran Alliance. 3 other species followed within 2 days. The Council's authority was crumbling faster than anyone had predicted. Theron made one last desperate move. He ordered the Super Dreadnought Judgment to deploy immediately, even though its sister ships were not complete. The massive vessel was 15 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. It jumped into the Corvin system accompanied by what remained of the Council's loyal fleet. Captain Ryan Mitchell watched the Judgment emerge from hyperspace on his view screen. On it, the ship was massive and intimidating, exactly the kind of overwhelming force projection that the old Council relied on. His tactical officer reported that the Judgment was charging its main weapons. "All ships, this is Admiral Theron." The transmission echoed across open communication channels. "The Council hereby claims jurisdiction over the Corvin system. Human forces will withdraw immediately or be fired upon. You have 60 seconds to comply." Mitchell's hand moved toward his weapons controls. This was the moment that would decide whether there would be war or an uneasy peace. He could see on his scanners that the Judgment was targeting Corvin population centers. They were going to kill millions of civilians just to prove their authority. "All ships activate defensive shields," Mitchell ordered. "Move to intercept their firing solutions. Do not fire unless fired upon, but we are not letting them murder innocent people. The Valiant and her escort vessels positioned themselves between the Judgment and the planet below. The Council fleet found itself facing a choice between backing down or starting a war they might not win. For 30 long seconds that felt like hours, the galaxy held its breath waiting to see what would happen. Then something unexpected occurred that changed everything. The Corvan government broadcast a joint message from both sides of their civil war. We request Terran Alliance protection, the message stated. We formally apply for membership and demand the Council fleet withdraw from our sovereign space immediately. The Civil War had been a manipulation. The fighting was real enough, but it had been deliberately prolonged by Council agents working both sides. When the evidence of Council manipulation was released publicly, the Corvan factions had reconciled within hours. They were united now by rage at being used as pawns in someone else's political game. Theron found himself trapped. If he attacked now, he would be firing on a Terran Alliance member world. That meant war with Earth, and after months of watching human capabilities, he knew how that war would end. Council fleet withdraw, Theron finally ordered, his voice hollow with defeat. The Judgment turned away from Corvan space along with the rest of his ships. Captain Ryan Mitchell watched them go and allowed himself to breathe properly for the first time in hours. War had been avoided, but everyone knew it was only a temporary reprieve. Back on Earth, Admiral Blake was studying detailed scans of the Judgment with growing concern. Dr. Linda Hayes stood beside him in the command center, pointing at energy readings. That made no sense according to conventional physics. Their shield technology is more advanced than we predicted, she explained. If they finish building those other super dreadnoughts and refine this design, they might actually have weapons that can threaten our defenses. Then we need to make sure they never get the chance to build them, Blake replied quietly. It is time for the next phase of our strategy. 6 months had passed since the standoff at Corvan, and the galaxy had settled into an uneasy balance. The Terran Alliance now included 62 species and controlled nearly a third of known space. Human technology and training had transformed weak defensive forces into capable militaries. Trade was booming, and scientific cooperation was producing breakthroughs that benefited everyone in the Alliance. But resentment festered in the shadows. The Council had been humiliated repeatedly, and powerful species do not forgive humiliation easily. Intelligence reports showed massive shipbuilding programs in Council space. They were constructing not just the remaining super dreadnoughts, but entire fleets of upgraded vessels incorporating lessons learned from the Battle of Sol. Colonel Karen Foster presented her latest analysis to the Alliance leadership. They are preparing for total war, she said bluntly. We estimate they will have numerical superiority within 8 months. Our technological advantage will help, but numbers matter in warfare. President Martinez listened to the briefing with a troubled expression. Can we match their production rates? Not without converting every shipyard and factory in Alliance space to military production, Secretary of Defense William Grant replied. That would cripple our civilian economy and undermine everything we have built. Lisa Cameron attended the meeting via holographic projection from Unity Station. There might be another option, she said. We have been playing defense since the Battle of Sol. Maybe it is time we took the initiative. What are you proposing? Martinez asked. The operation was given a simple code name: Skyfall. While the galaxy's attention remained focused on military buildup and diplomatic maneuvering, a small team of human operatives had been working in absolute secrecy for months. Captain Alex Turner's reconnaissance missions had mapped every Council military installation, every shipyard, every critical infrastructure node across their entire territory. But Earth was not preparing to attack. They were preparing to make an offer that would reshape galactic civilization forever. President Martinez addressed the Galactic Council via direct transmission. That was broadcast simultaneously to every inhabited world in known space. The speech was simple and direct, without diplomatic double talk or political maneuvering. Members of the Council, she began. Over the past year, we have watched you struggle to maintain control through fear, manipulation, and the constant threat of violence. You have built weapons designed to destroy entire worlds. You have funded civil wars that killed millions. You have sacrificed innocent lives to preserve your authority. But I am here to tell you there is a better way forward. On screens across the galaxy, detailed proposals appeared. economic integration plans that would benefit everyone, technology sharing agreements that would raise living standards across hundreds of worlds, a new governmental structure that would give every species equal representation regardless of their size or military power. Earth proposes the complete dissolution of the Galactic Council and its replacement with the Federation of Free Worlds. Martinez continued. Every member species receives one vote in all decisions. No species is more important than any other. Decisions are made democratically by majority vote. And yes, we will share our military technology, but only with those who agree to use it purely for defensive purposes. The reaction was immediate and divided along predictable lines. Smaller species erupted in celebration at the thought of true equality and protection without submission. The idea that their voices would matter as much as the great powers was revolutionary and intoxicating, but the major powers rejected it instantly. The Velcorn Empire, the Thrusic hegemony, and the remnants of Zerathi space had built their civilizations on the foundation of dominance. They would never accept being reduced to equal status with species they had exploited for centuries. Within the council chamber, Theron rallied his remaining supporters for one final stand. "This is exactly what we warned everyone about," he said. "The humans seek to remake the galaxy in their own image and impose their values on civilizations that existed long before they left their primitive planet." But his words had lost their power. Too many species had experienced what the old order brought them: exploitation, manipulation, and endless war. The human offer at least promised something different, even if it was uncertain. The real test came when Velcorn battle groups mobilized across their territory. 20 separate fleets containing hundreds of warships began moving toward key alliance positions. It looked like preparation for the massive assault everyone had feared. In Earth's command center, tension was suffocating. Admiral Blake had his fleet ready for deployment, but even with superior technology, the casualty projections for an all-out war were devastating. Millions would die on both sides before anyone achieved victory. Then Colonel Karen Foster burst into the room with urgent intelligence. "Sir, we have intercepted communications from inside the Velcorn command structure," she said breathlessly. "They are not unified anymore. Half their admirals are refusing to follow orders. They do not want to die fighting for the Council's lost cause. It was the breakthrough they desperately needed." Human diplomats immediately made contact with the dissenting Velcorn officers through secure channels. The message was simple and direct. Support the old order and face destruction, or join the new Federation and share in prosperity and peace. Over the next 72 hours, the Council's military power structure collapsed from within like a building with rotted foundations. Admiral after admiral defected and brought their entire fleets with them. Species that had served the Council faithfully for centuries suddenly realized they no longer feared retribution for making their own choices. The judgment sat incomplete in its orbital dock, abandoned by workers who had been building it. The super dreadnought that was supposed to be the Council's ultimate weapon would never be finished. 3 other partially constructed sister ships suffered the same fate as their construction crews simply walked away. Theron made his final stand surrounded by the last handful of loyalists in the council chamber. He barricaded the doors and declared that the galaxy would descend into chaos and anarchy without proper leadership from those who understood how to maintain order. Lisa Cameron walked into the chamber peacefully, accompanied by Jake Morrison and a small security detail. Nobody tried to stop them because nobody was left to guard the doors. The once mighty council had been reduced to a dozen frightened representatives. "It is over, Theron," Lisa said quietly. "The vote has already been held across the galaxy. 217 species have ratified the Federation Charter. Only 14 chose to remain with the old council. You have lost everything. You have destroyed an order that kept peace for 1,000 years. Theron replied, his voice broken and defeated. "You kept peace by making everyone too afraid to fight back." Jake corrected him. "That is not real peace. That is just oppression with a different name. What we are building now is something genuinely better for everyone." The last official act of the Galactic Council was its own voluntary dissolution. The remaining representatives voted to transfer all assets, territories, and governmental responsibilities to the newly formed Federation of Free Worlds. It was a quiet end to an organization that had ruled the galaxy for centuries. 3 months later, the Federation's inaugural session convened on Unity Station. The chamber had been completely rebuilt to accommodate representatives from 231 different species. The room buzzed with hundreds of different languages as real-time translation systems worked constantly to keep everyone connected. President Helen Martinez had been elected as the Federation's first Secretary General by popular vote. She stood at the central podium looking out at the assembled representatives and felt the weight of history on her shoulders. "We stand at a threshold today," she began. "Behind us lies a history filled with conflict, exploitation, and fear. Ahead of us lies the possibility of genuine cooperation, shared growth, and lasting peace. Not the false peace of imposed order, but true peace built on mutual respect and prosperity." The first order of business was establishing the Federation Defense Force as a unified military command. Captain Ryan Mitchell was promoted to admiral and given command of the combined fleet. Ships from dozens of different species were formed into integrated battle groups. Each vessel had been retrofitted with human technology, while retaining unique design elements from their original builders. Dr. Linda Hayes unveiled the Federation's ambitious research initiatives. Advanced technology would be shared freely among all member species with the goal of raising everyone to competitive levels. The days of hoarding knowledge for strategic advantage were officially over, but not everyone was celebrating the new order. In the remnants of council space, in systems that had rejected Federation membership, resentment and anger festered like infected wounds. The Thracic Empire remained proud and militaristic, swearing they would never bow to human leadership. Remnant Sirathi clans burning for revenge gathered their remaining forces in the dark spaces between stars, where sensors could not easily track them. In a secure briefing room deep within Luna Base, Admiral Blake met quietly with his intelligence chiefs. The war might be over, but the threats had not disappeared. Colonel Karen Foster laid out the latest threat assessments on the holographic table. "We have won the political battle, but the military threat has not disappeared," she explained. "The Thracic have allied with several other holdout species. They are pooling resources and building new ships. They are slower than us and less technologically advanced, but they have significant numbers." "How long before they are ready to make their move?" Blake asked. 6 months at the minimum," Karen replied. "Maybe as long as a year if we are lucky. They are being careful and learning from past mistakes." Blake studied the tactical projections with a thoughtful expression. "Then we use that time to make the Federation stronger. Every species that joins us makes us harder to defeat. Every day that passes makes the old order look more like ancient history." The Federation was growing stronger with each passing week. Trade routes that had been controlled by council monopolies were now open to everyone. Scientific breakthroughs were being shared freely instead of hoarded for competitive advantage. Worlds that had lived in poverty under council exploitation were experiencing prosperity for the first time in generations. But prosperity required protection. Admiral Ryan Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Federation flagship Unity, watching a combined fleet practice maneuvers in deep space. Velcorn cruisers flew in formation alongside former Corvin fighters. Even a few reformed Zirathi crews had joined, seeking redemption for their species' past crimes. The sight would have been impossible just a year ago. "Admiral, we are receiving priority communications from 17 different systems," his communications officer reported. "They are requesting Federation assistance with various projects. Medical aid, engineering support, educational programs. Acknowledge all requests and dispatch appropriate response teams," Mitchell ordered. Then he smiled at his executive officer. "You know, I spent my entire military career preparing for war. It feels strange to find myself building peace instead." His officer laughed. "Sir, knowing humanity, we will probably end up doing both before this is finished." Mitchell nodded. "Probably true, but at least now we are not facing it alone." On Earth, Lisa Cameron reviewed reports from across Federation space in her Geneva office. Trade was flourishing beyond all projections. Scientific cooperation was producing medical advances and technological breakthroughs. Species that had been bitter enemies for generations were learning to work together toward common goals. It was not perfect by any measure. There were still disputes and disagreements between member species. Old prejudices and ancient hatreds did not disappear overnight just because a treaty was signed. Cultural misunderstandings caused diplomatic incidents on a regular basis. But there was genuine progress happening, and it was measurable in ways that mattered. Her communicator chimed with an incoming call. Jake Morrison's face appeared on the screen looking pleased. "Lisa, you should see this," he said. "The Inari homeworld just completed construction of their first human-designed defense station. They are throwing a massive celebration and specifically requested your presence as guest of honor. Tell them I will be there," Lisa replied with a warm smile. As her shuttle lifted off toward the spaceport, she looked down at Earth through the viewport. The planet that the galaxy had dismissed as weak and primitive now stood as the center of a new civilization spanning hundreds of worlds. It was almost overwhelming to think about how much had changed in such a short time, but in the darker corners of the galaxy, old powers were not finished fighting. The Thracic Empire had always been proud warriors who valued strength above all else. They saw the Federation as weakness disguised as cooperation. In their fortress world deep in unconquered space, Thracic military leaders planned their revenge. "We have studied human tactics carefully," their war chief declared to assembled commanders. "They rely on technological superiority and assume their enemies will fight conventionally. We will show them what true warriors can accomplish." The Thracic strategy was brutal in its simplicity. They would not attack Federation military forces directly, where human technology gave overwhelming advantages. Instead, they would strike at civilian targets across a wide front: refugee convoys, trade stations, and lightly defended colony worlds. They would force the Federation to spread its forces thin, trying to protect everything. The first attacks came without warning, on a dozen worlds, simultaneously. Thracic raiders hit fast and hard before disappearing back into uncharted space. Casualty numbers were not catastrophic, but the psychological impact was significant. The Federation had promised protection, and now civilians were dying. Emergency sessions were called on Unity Station. Ambassador Sareth stood before the assembled representatives demanding immediate military response. "We cannot allow these attacks to continue," he said. "The Thracic must be shown that aggression has consequences." But Lisa urged caution. "If we respond with overwhelming force, we prove their propaganda that the Federation is just another empire. We need to be smarter than that." Admiral Blake had a different perspective. "We need to end this threat permanently, but in a way that does not make us look like conquerors. I have a proposal." The operation was planned with typical human precision. Rather than massive fleet deployments, small teams of Special Forces operators infiltrated Thracic space using advanced stealth technology. Their mission was not to kill, but to gather intelligence and evidence. Captain Alex Turner led one such team deep into Thracic territory. His team spent weeks documenting everything they found. Slave labor camps where captured species were worked to death. Weapons facilities that violated every treaty on chemical and biological warfare. Mass graves containing millions of victims from species the Thracic considered inferior. When the evidence was compiled and released publicly, the reaction across the galaxy was one of horror and disgust. Species that had been neutral suddenly demanded action against the Thracic. Even some Thracic civilians were shocked by what their military had been doing in secret. The Federation response was measured but devastating. They did not invade Thracic space or attempt conquest. Instead, they established a complete blockade. No ships in or out, no trade, no communication with the outside galaxy. The Thracic Empire was isolated and left to face the consequences of their actions. Within 3 months, the Thracic military government collapsed. Civilian populations rose up against leaders who had brought ruin upon them. A new government formed that immediately requested Federation membership and agreed to face justice for war crimes. It was a victory, but Blake took no satisfaction from it. "Every species we defeat creates resentment that will last for generations," he said to his staff. "We need to be better than that." The solution came from an unexpected source. Dr. Linda Hayes proposed a comprehensive reconstruction program. The Federation would help rebuild Thracic worlds and integrate them fully into galactic society. War criminals would face justice, but ordinary citizens would be given opportunities to build better lives. It was expensive and controversial. Many species wanted punishment, not mercy, for the Thracic, but President Martinez pushed the program through over objections. "We are not building an empire of revenge," she declared. "We are building a civilization based on hope." 5 years after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy looked completely different. The Federation included over 300 species working together in genuine cooperation. The old council was remembered as a cautionary tale taught in schools. Trade and prosperity had reached levels never seen before in galactic history. Lisa Cameron stood once again in the great assembly hall on Unity Station, but everything had changed. Where she had once begged uselessly for help, she now watched representatives from hundreds of worlds work together solving shared problems. Where humans had been dismissed as weak, they were now respected as leaders who had reshaped civilization. But she never forgot the lessons of those early days. Power without wisdom was tyranny. Strength without compassion was cruelty. The Federation worked because it was built on principles that valued every species regardless of size or capability. Admiral Ryan Mitchell commanded fleets that patrolled Federation space, keeping the peace. The ships under his command represented true diversity. Crews from dozens of species worked side by side, learning from each other and building friendships that crossed every boundary. One day, his communications officer received an unusual message. "Sir, we are being hailed by a small vessel on the frontier. They claim to be a newly discovered species requesting contact with the Federation." Mitchell smiled. "Dispatch a first contact team and make sure they are welcomed properly. Let us show them that the galaxy can be a better place than it used to be." On Earth, children learned about the Battle of Saul in their history classes. They studied how humanity had hidden its strength and waited for the right moment to reveal it. But the teachers made sure to emphasize the more important lesson. Strength was meaningless without the wisdom to use it properly. Admiral Blake retired from active service but remained an advisor to Federation leadership. He spent his final years writing a comprehensive history of the transformation from Council to Federation. The last line of his book became famous across hundreds of worlds. Humanity did not conquer the galaxy through superior weapons or advanced technology. We changed it by offering something the old order never understood: the belief that civilization means protecting the weak, elevating the fallen, and building a future where every voice matters equally. President Martinez completed her term as Secretary General and returned to Earth. She spent her remaining years working with young diplomats, teaching them the delicate art of building bridges between different species and cultures. Her most repeated lesson was simple but profound. "Power reveals character," she would say. "The galaxy gave humanity the opportunity to become tyrants, and we chose a different path. That choice defines us more than any weapon or technology ever could." The Federation was not perfect. There were still conflicts and challenges. New threats emerged from unexplored regions of space. Political disputes sometimes threatened unity. But the foundation was strong because it was built on principles that valued cooperation over domination. In the end, the galaxy had frozen in shock when Earth came under attack, expecting to witness humanity's extinction. Instead, they witnessed humanity's true power. Not just the weapons and ships and technology, but something far more dangerous to tyrants and oppressors everywhere: the power of hope. The power of unity. The power of the radical idea that strength should be used to protect rather than exploit, to build rather than destroy, to inspire rather than intimidate. And that power changed everything forever.